You're welcome back. Over the weekend, former governor of Anambra State and Labour Party's 2023 presidential candidate, Peter Obi, made a bold statement that the garment and footwear industry in Aba could rival Nigeria's oil revenue if properly harnessed. The statement has since stirred conversation among business leaders, traders, and economic analysts, raising critical questions about the true capacity of Aba's industrial ecosystem. Is the market truly competitive at a global level? What metrics should be used to measure its potential? And what exactly is happening within the commercial hub that continues to draw both local and international attention? Joining me to discuss this is Mr. Tony Odukwe, Business Development Consultant, and he is MD Export Chamber of International Trade and Investment. Mr. Tony, you're welcome.
Welcome, thank you.
Yes. So Mr. Obi made a very strong claim over the weekend. It stirred conversation, argument. Some people were like, this is an exaggerated statement. Do you think it's exaggerated?
The fact that people are surprised that surprised at what he said tells me the level of illiteracy or incompetence, in this climate.
I think they're surprised based on what he's comparing it to, that he could surpass.
That exposes the illiteracy that is endemic around here. What he said is not a lie. It's the truth, right? Why is oil very important? It drives our cars, right?
Yeah.
And so if you come to any, for example, come to Nigeria, what is the ratio of the people that own cars and people that don't? So that means there are millions of Nigerians who are not spending money on fuel and will never spend money on fuel because they can't afford to buy a car. But every human being alive has to wear a cloth. Every human being alive has to dress. Every human being alive has to wear shoes. Every human being alive at some point has to wear a cap. And they have to spend money on those things. So that industry caters to every Nigerian, poor or rich, young or old. So that's potential right there, right? Now, the question is, do we have the right kind of investment in the infrastructure you need to generate that kind of wealth?
Okay.
Right. So it's something that I believe we're going to talk about.
Yes, and that gets me to the part of his own case study, which is the Aba garment and footwear industry. Yeah. Looking at what do you think this industry is like currently? What is its state currently? How developed is the garment and footwear industry in Aba like currently in Nigeria?
They're actually working magic in Aba because they're making something out of nothing, right? No support whatsoever from the federal government, and they are really doing great things in Aba. Like I remember I mentioned it here one of the times I visited you. That a lot of the clothing made in Aba are sold overseas as made in somewhere else, not made in Nigeria, right? A lot of them are also sold in many boutiques in Nigeria as made in France. Some would put Federal Republic FRN. On their labels. And so you look at it, you think France, right? So it becomes a strategy for them to actually gain acceptance in the market.
Is it a strategy because at the end of the day, you're shortchanging?
No, it's a strategy. No, it's a strategy for the man who's selling. He's putting his sweat and tears, well, maybe not tears, but he's putting his sweat into making something. He wants it to sell.
But that goes a long way to tell us that we are not proud of what we have.
That's the point I'm making. So, but because many Nigerians are not proud of anything made in Nigeria, which is a mindset handed down by the white man, it actually came from colonialism, So Nigerians are not proud of wearing made in Nigeria. They always want to wear foreign and brag about wearing foreign. Because the average Nigerian, not just Nigerian, the average African believes that he belongs when he is able to wear what his white counterparts are wearing, and so it's a very poor mindset. So basically, they would put that FRN. So when you look at it, you think France. And so a lot of people will buy it on the basis that it's made from France. What FRN simply means Federal Republic of Nigeria. So it's a game they play in but some of them would outright put made in Germany or made in America on the labels so that they can sell, right? But that's part of why the potential of Aba is not realized yet, because the people who are supposed to be serving aren't proud enough to spend their money on the goods they're making at Aba. Okay. But that is where government policy has to come in.
Okay. Before we get to the part of the government policies, right, do you think that they are competing well globally?
Absolutely not. In the scheme of things, Aba is nowhere. Aba is just Aba. It's a small enclave where some artisans have come together and made something. That's why I say they're magicians. They've made something out of nothing, right? It's a little enclave, compared to global trade. In global trade, you have three models, global benchmarks. It's China, and China is making $300 billion annually from the sector. We're talking about textile.
Yes, right? Yes.
Then Vietnam is the other one. Okay. And Vietnam makes about 45 to 50 billion annually. And then the other one is Bangladesh. Making about $45 billion annually. Nigeria can do a lot more than this. Let's rule out China, but I can confidently say that Nigeria can beat Vietnam and Bangladesh if we had the right kind of investment put in, if we had the right kind of infrastructure put in, if we had the right kind of training brought home so that you can train people who will work in the sector. It will create massive jobs for our people because it's a market that will never dry up. Because people have to dress every day. People buy clothing, all the time. And so it's a market that you just can't go wrong with it. Now, you're talking about a market of 250 million Nigerians. And imagine where government invests in proper industries. That is from raw materials. That is from the industries that will take raw materials and make them into yarns and fabrics and stuff. And then you talk about industries that will take the fabrics and make them into finished clothing, right? And then you talk about the adirays and the batiks and that are actually selling overseas, highly in demand overseas, right? So it's a sector that you could never go wrong with, but we need the right kind of investment in infrastructure, investment in trainings to have the workforce that will serve, these industries. Okay. And now look at it, you're trying to serve a market that is a local market that is 250 million strong, but you're talk about the regional market. So when you talk about the regional market plus the local market, this is about 450 million strong, right? And already with the little Aba is doing, people are coming from as far as Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal, Malabo. So come and buy stuff from Aba.
All right. Again, one thing that people are hinting on is what is limiting us and limiting this industry. Let's look at the part of raw materials. Aba is too heavily dependent on China, Bangladesh for raw materials. So how do we even upskill when we are so heavily dependent on them for machineries, raw materials?
Yeah, so that's why I said government policy has to come in. Government has to do a lot. Government has a lot of, actually, every industry that has to prosper in this country.
I don't mean to cut you short, really, Mr. Tony, but we live in Nigeria. We see how our government responds to things immediately. We have a story that has been trending, what happened in Jos. We're yet to see, their reaction and stuff. So we're looking at how can these people in Aba do something without being dependent on what governments
your questions are geared towards how can Aba compete globally.
Yes.
I'm trying to tell you the impediments. I'm trying to tell you what they can do to play globally. And I'm also trying to tell you why they can't compete globally. And you can't take the government out of that. So what Aba is doing now, Aba already is a multi-million dollar industry.
Okay.
But this was achieved by the artisans right there without government support.
And you don't think they can achieve more without government?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, you need to scale. It gets to a point where you really need to scale. And to scale, you need money, you need industries, you need power. So thank God Alex Oti is doing well with not even Alex Oti, because the power that is making Aba very famous right now precedes Alex Oti. It's Bat Naji, who is a local of Enugu State, one of the 3 most influential scientists globally. He went there and set up geometrics, and that's not to promote geometrics, but that's why they even have a semblance of, steady power. But I don't know if that covers all of Aba. Because I heard Alex Oti saying that they don't mind pulling out of the national grid, that his commissioner of whatever is overseas negotiating how they can actually bring in 24-hour power and serve the whole of Aba. Yeah, so are they going to give themselves power? Are the artisans going to give themselves power? That's why you can't rule out the government. So you have to give them power. Now, the machinery that they need to produce world-class clothing that can compete globally doesn't sell 400,000 naira. These are multi-million dollar equipments. They can't afford it, right? But yes, there's some private investment that brought in good machinery into Aba. You know, there a few people I've heard of that brought in and set up great factories, like beautiful factories that are, you know, already competing, but you need a lot more investment to make that happen. And you can't rule out the government, right? So the government has to, first of all, make policies, to make sure that they bring some kind of funding, or even set up an ecosystem where they bring in the equipment themselves and actually arrange with these people on how they can access, you know, the services of this equipment and find a way for government to be, you know, paid back for these investments, you know, but you just can't rule out the government.
All right. So I want to also focus on a question that speaks about us as citizens of Nigeria, right? So there's an argument Nigerians make that they buy Aba-made garments largely because they are more affordable, but not necessarily because they prefer them. Do you think the industry has a perception and branding problem that limit its appeal? Or is it just a Nigerian thing that we don't like our own? Because when we see like Aba-made and stuff, what do you think?
That question has a two-part answer. One is that mindset came down from colonization, that everything white is better than black, you know. So Africans will always prefer everything foreign, right? So it goes down to the food we eat, right? You put two cereals on the table. One is made in America. The other one is made in Nigeria. And every Nigerian believes that the one in America is a lot better than the one, you know, in Nigeria. But it's actually wrong. Now, did you know that the best electrical wires globally, the best electrical wires are made in Nigeria? But many Nigerians won't believe that. So that same wire that is the best in the world, you put it down and put one from China and one from America down. Most Nigerians will buy, you know, the American one. It's only when that runs out that they're going to go to China before they can ever come to the Nigerian one, right? So it's a mindset, but it's also an issue of branding, right? Branding costs money. And so these artisans at Aba will not put money that they would put in inventory into branding. Because a lot of them don't even see the importance of branding. That's what we've done for so many years. We'll keep doing it that way till we die. You know, they wouldn't really necessarily see the importance of branding, but branding is absolutely very important, because if you get your branding right, it tells a story about your product, and that story is actually what makes your product sell better. All right.
Yes. And you also think that this would also reflect on the GDP, contribution, export earnings, job creation?
Absolutely. Like I said, Aba is already exporting. In the Southeast, I think the most export going out of the Southeast is going out from Aba, right? So they're already doing great. I know that there are shops in America that buy boxers from Aba. These boxers are made in Aba, but labeled with the company's label. So you don't know they are made in Nigeria, right? So a lot of West Africa and Central African countries are buying from Aba already. But what we're saying is, to see export grow, what P2B is looking at is a value chain in textile, not just made clothes. I'm sure what he's talking about is from the raw material down to the fabrics, and then the fabrics to finished clothing, and then you know, serving the local market and exporting. Now, when you create a formidable value chain, textile value chain, it's worth billions, and it can give Nigeria as much as oil is given. And actually, if the cards are played right, Nigeria can make as much as $80 billion annually from that industry alone. How much does petroleum give us? It's between 45 to 50 billion dollars annually. So if we can actually set up the textile value chain properly, and we're making 80,000, where's the line? We're making $80 billion. Where's the line? What P2B said. Yes.
Okay, so like you mentioned, we can't rule out the government, and that's the truth. So what kind of policies, infrastructure investment are needed to scale this industry that you could, you know, give us?
First of all, the major problem for any industry in Nigeria is funding. Entrepreneurs in Nigeria suffer greatly from a lack of funding. Right? There has to be proper policy around funding, because, you know, funding is what businesses need to run. It's the fuel that runs industries. And Nigerians are very creative people, but without money, you just can't do anything. Now, it brings me to the point that they're now saying that tomorrow is the deadline for taxes. Now, you're demanding
tomorrow or today?
31st.
Yeah, today's
31st. Yes. Okay. Now, today is the deadline. So you're demanding and enforcing taxation when you've given nothing to Nigerians. I have always said, not just on this platform, I've said it, that the only justification for taxation is that you give infrastructure, you give back to the people who you're expecting to pay back to you. You give them funding, you give them money, you give them infrastructure, you give them, trainings. You give to them first before you can
Jobs.
have justification to take back from them. And if you're not giving to the people and you're taking back, it's not taxation, it's criminal extortion. And we have to stop doing that. Now, listen. People need investment, right? Again, policies around, funding. It's only when you have made the right policies for Nigerians to access funding that you can expect that they will grow, scale, and pay back taxes. Now, look at, for example, in America, for example, you can walk into any bank. Once your business is registered and your credit score is right, you can walk into any bank and get funding. So I can want to buy a house that is worth $200,000 in America right now. All I require to own that house is to put down 10% of that money. So what I need to do is 10% of 200,000 is $20,000. What I need to do is tell my cousin or my friend or anybody to give me $20,000. Then I go to the bank and say, hey, I want to buy this house. So I'm giving you a down payment of 10%. I need the other 180,000 to go buy this house. And that's all you need to get 180,000 from the bank, because there are policies around that. There are policies around funding and entrepreneurial support. We don't have that in Nigeria. And that's why people are given an arm and a leg to actually set up businesses. And at the end of the day, you're killing these businesses by overtaxing them.
All right. Mr. Tony Odukwe, that has been so insightful. Thank you very much. And I pray at this point that people in places of authority are listening and they are putting heads together to make sure that industries, different sectors, spring up and do better, not just for the country, but for individuals living in the country. Thank you so much, Mr. Tony Odukwe. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, and that's it on the Eastern Business Report. And the Afia Business Morning returns tomorrow. Many thanks for staying with us. My name is Noma Aniwene. Bye for now.